Biology, you'll talk about that, 11, 8, and then this is the hippocampus back here. And they work, of course, if you follow them around, look, if you could peel all this off, and you follow it around, you can see cingulate gyrus with hippocampus back here to the amygdala. So they're all connected, forming a big C with the tip of your thumb being the amygdala, this being the hippocampus, and this being the cingulate gyrus, which is where they get that C from, right? C shape. C for cingulate, you've got it. Now, it's hard to ask some of these questions, as you might guess, but I like throwing it all in so that you feel like you're getting to know the anatomy in more detail. This white matter here is called the corpus callosum. You can see it here. Massive area, it's not even white right here, see? Massive area of white matter that connects the cerebrum to the thalamus, to the cerebral peduncles, which we're going to see later, right? This region here is known as the septum pellucidum. Thank you. This is the window between the left and the right lateral ventricles. You have a ventricle inside your left hemisphere and a ventricle inside your right hemisphere. They both drain into this, the third ventricle. But between the two ventricles, there is a membrane that separates them, and that's the septum pellucidum, right here, number 8. You can see it here, it's unnumbered. This little bit of white matter here is known as the fornix. That's where the word fornicate comes from, so it has to do with the limbic system. And then this cavity right here is the third ventricle, as we mentioned. You can see it right here. The third ventricle lies between the thalami. So here's the hypothalamus down here. It notice has an extension that goes to the pituitary gland. That's the infundibulum. This is the epithalamus up here. That's also known as the pineal gland. You see it? And then this central area is the thalamus. Of course, the thalamus is much more easy to ask on the outside of, let's look at this thing. Here, because the thalamus looks like this peanut. On the outside, on the inside, you see the cavity more. So we're likely to ask it on that. In the thalamus, we're more likely to ask you this structure here, number 5. You can see it's a brown dot right here, and right here. And right here it's the pen is sticking out in it, right? This is the interthalamic adhesion. The two thalami adhere to one another at a point. And that's it, this interthalamic adhesion. Remember I told you the pineal glands at the center of the brain, so if you look at the brain, you can see the pineal gland, which is right here, is right at the center. The pineal gland, as you get older, it gets calcified. So when you take an X-ray, you can see a little white dot in the brain, which is the calcified pineal gland. And should it be moved up or down or over, so it's not in the middle anymore, you can literally use it as a guidepost to detect the presence of a tumor. Hey, that was a question.
That was definitely a question.
Did you figure out what it was?
I'd heard them talk about it before. I used to work at Lord's and Imaging, and they do the MRIs and stuff, and they talk about it.
So the pineal gland, right here, calcifies and forms a little dot in the brain, and if it moves significantly in one direction or another, you figure a tumor's pushing it. Right? And then this stuff that's kind of colored like blood vessels here, kind of purplish with red and blue stripes. Again here, red and blue stripes. Again here, well here it's bright blue. That is the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus secretes cerebrospinal fluid. There is choroid plexus found in all of the ventricles, but in our models we only see it in the third ventricle, the one that's within the thalami. This canal is called the cerebral aqueduct. It connects the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. It's also known as the mesencephalic aqueduct because it's found inside the mesencephalon. This is the mesencephalon right here. The most obvious structures on the mesencephalon are these swellings. They're not very obvious here. They make them a little more obvious here. And you can see them right here, the swellings, see? There are 4 of them, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. These are known as the corpora quadrigemina. They're so important that they have a number of different names. They're also known as the superior colliculi, the larger ones on top. The smaller ones are called the inferior colliculi. Corpora quadrigemina means 4 swollen bodies. What? Quadra means 4, gemina means to swell, and corpora means bodies. These 4 swollen bodies are responsible for your optic and your auditory reflexes. So they're pretty important, right? So you have this little pineal gland that's a body, and then you have these 4 bodies here. So lots of little bodies, plus the pituitary gland. This is the optic chiasma. It's cut, so it's not really obvious. It's more obvious here. That's the optic chiasma. You can see it again here. And right behind it, this little bean is the pituitary gland, which makes this little white stalk the infundibulum of the hypothalamus. And of course, this bone, this is dura mater going around the pituitary gland. The pia mater and the arachnoid meninges do not go around the pituitary gland, only the dura mater. And it's buried in this little cavity right here, right above. This is the sphenoid sinus. This little cavity right here is called the sella turcica. Hey, that was a test question today, too. You got all that right?
Maybe we should have came to live first.
Wasn't this also on the video?
Not all this information.
Oh my goodness. And those videos aren't that good. Throw them away. All right. That makes this the pons. This the 4th ventricle. And this the cerebellum. And what's all this white stuff called? Looks like a tree.
Arbor vitae.
The arbor vitae, tree of life, when you translate it. And then this swelling here down to the foramen magnum is called the medulla oblongata, right? So where's the foramen magnum on this? Well, here's the tip of the occipital bone. Here's the other tip, so you have to imagine these 2 connecting. You can draw an imaginary line right there, and that makes this the medulla oblongata. And once you get past this imaginary line right here into here, that is the spinal cord. So what's this? It's actually a bone that wraps all the way around to here. It has no spine. That makes it the atlas. And what is this? That is the dens of the atlas, right? Remember the dens of the atlas? So this is the dorsal spine, or spinous process of the atlas. This would be C3, C4, C5, so you can actually figure them out. All right, we already mentioned this. This is the sphenoid sinus. This is the frontal sinus. Part of this would be the nasal sinus, so we're not going to ask that. We'll stick to frontal or sphenoid sinus. These are the nasal conchae. This is the maxilla, and of course this is the palatine process of the maxilla. This little thing is the palatine bone. And this structure sticking down like a thumb is the uvula, U-V-U-L-A. Sticks out in the back of your mouth like a finger sticking down. You've looked inside your mouth and seen that uvula? Very good. Right? This is the opening to the eustachian tube, also known as the internal acoustic or auditory canal. Right? This is also the opening to the internal acoustic meatus, right? This is the pharyngeal tonsil. This is the lingual tonsil. And this tonsil in here is known as the palatine tonsil. So pharyngeal tonsil, palatine tonsil, lingual tonsil. Of course, this is the lips, teeth, tongue, too easy. Right? What's this? You can see it inside view. This is the hyoid bone, which makes this the epiglottis. Now, I can't ask you pharynx because it's too hard. But I can ask you pharyngeal tonsil, and I mean, if you know these parts, I'm going to assume you know this is the pharynx, right? And of course, this is the larynx right here, which includes the epiglottis, the vocal cords, and of course the cartilages. This big one here is the thyroid cartilage. This is also the thyroid cartilage. And this little one here is the cricoid cartilage. And there's some others, but we have to look at a different model to see the others. And then this is the esophagus. Well, it took a long time. There's a lot of parts to the head, right?
Only one thing.
What's that?
I said that's only one thing.
That's one station.
Yeah.
But it helps you with all these others, because if I'm asking this, and you learned it here, you'll be able to figure it out. Orba vitae, fourth ventricle, cerebral aqueduct. Right? This little swelling right here, which you can see right there, number 12. Oh, well, mammillary body. And I forget what it does offhand. You can see it right here, mammillary body. You can also see some of the cranial nerves coming off. Well, here's the